Okay, awesome. Thanks again, everybody, for coming today. So I do have a 12:30, my intro to MEP class. So I've tried to make this as succinct as I can and try to leave a few opportunities for questions at the end. So today, again, I'm primarily going to be reviewing kind of off-site construction. And so I'll talk through what that is. So what is off-site construction? Benefits to off-site construction, some of the obstacles that we're facing in terms of kind of maximizing our opportunities to do off-site construction, and then some recommended path forward. So off-site construction, I think most everybody has heard of several of the terms, but I'll just read a very boring sort of thing. It's the planning, design, fabrication, and assembly of building elements at a location other than their final installed location to support the rapid and efficient construction of a permanent structure. Okay, so that's really what off-site construction is generalized as. There's four primary different ways to achieve off-site construction. There's pre-assembly, prefabrication, multi-trade fabrication, and then something that's newer is modularization. Okay, so we'll run through all of those. So first up, pre-assembly, pretty basic, but you'd be surprised still how few people even take advantage of this. Okay, so in the example on the left, right, you have just pre-installing hardware on doors. Okay, you can do this in a facility. You don't have to have thousands of boxes of individual hardware and little bags with screws, right? You can do this in a facility. And then there's creative ways, you know, with styrofoam blocks, being able to install them and be able to rapidly install these in the field. On the picture right, I actually took this at Southland Industry Shop down in Orange. They do this with faucets and sinks. Okay, pre-assembly is you're just assembling something. You're not cutting, you're not welding, you're not doing anything. You're literally taking parts out of a box and doing it in an off-site way. Okay, so there's clearly a lot of benefits to doing even pre-assembly, right? You're not taking, again, hundreds of thousands of individual little boxes that you get from manufacturers. And there's an increased opportunity also to recycle those packagings. And you can do this using apprentices or laborers in a fab shop facility, not necessarily your journeyman out on site. Then you have prefabrication. Okay, so this is actually the cutting, the assembly. It's obviously a little bit more of an in-depth process. So on the left, again, more plumbing. So this is some carriers for your bathroom, so your drain waste vent, everything that would be installed in a wall, again, done in a fabrication facility where you can control costs and do things much quicker and easier. And then on the right, some prefabricated wall panels. Okay, so you then hoist that entire wall panel assembly into place. But prefabrication is primarily a single trade operation. Okay, so it's done in a single shop in which you then, as the specialty contractor or trade contractor, are then bringing those parts onto the job site. Next up, you have multi-trade fabrication. So the picture shown here is a rack system, right? You would kind of jack this up into a hallway or in a space in a building. You've got kind of in the upper left-hand corner here, you can see some piping. So it'd be some chilled water, some heating hot water systems. You have ductwork, you have cable tray systems, you have conduit. So this is also another, let's say, newer way. Not a lot of companies do this. A lot of it has to do with kind of upfront coordination and also some union constraints in terms of where they're working in the facilities. But this is another great option to bring people together to, again, minimize some of the hours you might see on a job site. And then modularization. Okay, and so this is kind of a newer thing into where you're actually building pods. It's not just container houses anymore, although container houses and container buildings are still popular. There's new ways to kind of think outside of the box in terms of how we can create little modules and pods, and how we can have everybody come together to an offsite facility to actually bring everybody together to manufacture an area or a portion of the building almost in its entirety. Okay, so you can see in the picture on the left, you have your steel studs, you can see some plumbing there, you can see some electrical, right? You can see on the kind of further in the back left, you're starting to see sheetrock. You can actually install your tile, your FRP, you can install the fixtures, you can install the faucets and all of the trim and the lighting. And then you're literally just connecting on the top and the bottom in terms of connecting your utilities and installing those in the building. Okay, so there's a lot of different ways that you can treat offsite construction. When most people think of it nowadays, they're really thinking of this, which is modularization, but there's a lot of other ways that I mentioned, pre-assembly, prefabrication, that are still technically considered offsite construction. So there's a lot of benefits to doing this. Okay, so in the graphic here, you've got prefabrication, which is shown in green, and modular construction, which is shown in that kind of baby blue. So you have improved productivity. That is the #1 reason why most people end up doing offsite construction. So improved productivity means that you're able to more efficiently use your man hours in a fabrication facility because it's in a controlled environment than you can out on a job site. Okay, so saving yourself time, money, and a lot of times companies have been using this as ways to achieving and being winning projects, right? Because labor being the #1 cost on most every project, if you can find ways to better do it cheaper, better, faster from somebody else, it's because through your productivity. Okay. Second one is your improved quality. So you're doing things again in a controlled fabrication sort of facility. You naturally just have less defects and improved quality, increased schedule certainty. You're minimizing some of the risk associated with the hours being burned on the job site, as well as the cost predictability, because again, labor is your highest risk. When you have overruns on the project, it's in most cases always attributed to labor overruns. So again, if you can control that and increase productivity, you're going to be beneficial in the long run. From a sustainability perspective, the next one, reducing waste generated by construction, is key, because again, as I mentioned, you have the opportunity to buy more things possibly in bulk instead of individual parts and pieces. By increasing that quality, you're decreasing the amount of damage that might happen to materials on a job site. And as I mentioned in the pre-assembly piece, you're kind of trying to reduce, or you have a better opportunity to recycle a lot of those boxes and pallets and things that all of the material comes on when you need to install it. Increased client satisfaction comes with the improved cost and the improved schedule. So that's important to note. And then of course, last but certainly not least, improved safety performance. So because you're able to, again, move and shift more hours into a fabrication facility, that's again, that controlled environment, you're working in a more ergonomic fashion, there's a better flow of materials. Naturally, your employees will have less opportunity for the risks that you might see on a job site. So as an example, and I'll admit this was the physical science building on campus. So here is some ways that construction can look like, right? Very disorderly. Look at all the boxes. So imagine you're paying a journeyman, up here, $75 an hour to literally open every single one of those boxes and eventually dispose of it. And eventually, whatever is in those boxes, it's finding a home. Okay, where in a reality, you could pull that out as part of the pre-assembly process. So for your options, you can either do that in a facility or a location that looks like this, or maybe it looks like this. Okay. Clearly, you can see maybe which environment might be a little bit more conducive to higher productivity, right? There's better lighting, there's better workflow. So these are the sort of things that wise companies are really paying attention to. There's got to be a better way. There's something easier man hours that we can do doing things in a facility that looks like this, not like that, right? So the downside or the struggle is that there's still not a lot of companies, unfortunately, that are doing this, right? And this is a very common trend in construction, in that a lot of people are trying to do their best to actually kind of change the way we look at construction, do construction. So the top numbers here are the average percentage of companies that were part of this survey back in 2018 using offsite construction methods. Okay, so pre-assembly, only 25% of the companies are even doing pre-assembly, which seems to me like the most basic of things that you could do. Offsite multi-trade, of course, that's a very low number, 19%. Modularization, so a slightly higher number, surprisingly. And then only 46 are still doing prefabrication. Okay, so average percentage not using those things, you can see those numbers significantly higher. But at a minimum, you should be, I would feel, right, that at least prefabrication and pre-assembly, every company should be doing this. Okay, so I don't know if the survey was primarily more like general contractors that maybe don't actually perform a lot of scope of work to where they weren't being pulled. But I would think as a specialty contractor, I know all of the MEP trades do maximize their fabrication and pre-assembly as much as they can, but this is a trend that definitely needs to be shifted. So the prime reasons for why we need to do offsite construction, predominantly it all boils down to lack of skilled trades. So some of you have heard that before, a lot of you have heard me mention that before. So as the baby boomers, you know, kind of the end of the war heirs and their children, for skilled trades was still a very proud thing to do, right? You went and worked construction, you joined the union, right? And you helped build America. Now that's not really important anymore. People aren't attracted to being skilled trades, and AGC of California with their Build California initiative is trying to do a ton of things to help shift the mindset that everyone has towards construction. Increased pressure on project costs. So again, costs in every project is almost always over budget. I think Lean Construction did a note a couple years ago that saying like literally 70% of every single project that's ever awarded is over budget and over schedule. Okay, so there's got to be a better way for us to do this. So again, schedules, improved technology, allowing greater use, right? So there are new technologies and equipment out there that can help us increase the amount of prefab and offsite construction. Heightened safety concerns. So again, yes, can we shift hours outside of the job sites and to make things safer, quality, etc. But it's really skilled trades. That is the main reason. So we need to be smarter with the hours that we have and make them more productive. So how do we do this moving forward? And what are some of the other sort of concerns? So it really starts with the owners, right? Owners, when they say, hey, great, I've got a project that I'd like to build, it starts with them. So owners typically have to say, this is what I want to do. So some of the reasons as to why they're not choosing it. First one is the lack of knowledge, and they just don't know, right? And there's not a lot of general contractors out there, union general contractors out there, that are really doing a lot of modularization and really multi-trade coordinations. Two, of course, they always like to do things the way they've done them before. Okay, there's less risks associated with that. And it worked fine before. Why do we need to change? You know, there's a lot of that mindset. And then number three, unable to develop well-planned kind of like a business case to support the need for it. So if you have a project and you're an owner and you're trying to develop like a new way, you want it done at this time, you want it done within this cost, you know, you're going to have a lot of people saying, yes, we can do that. We can continue doing it the way we've been doing. I don't know about doing modularization. That sounds like a lot of upfront planning and work. And that's really what it is. So you have to come together with a huge amount of plan and coordinated resource to do the design and the pre-construction. The other reason that I've kind of highlighted over to the right is that procurement offices. So many of you aren't probably familiar, but each company that you go work for, or owners, for instance, or even at the university, there's a procurement department. And procurement departments hold a lot of special purposes, and they basically make sure that, of course, there's going to be fair bidding practices, and that you have the ability to define exactly what you're looking for and how you want to achieve that. So design build still has a very hard time getting through procurement groups because you don't actually know what the building's going to look like yet. So from a modularization and a design approach, it's even harder to attempt to quantify what exactly am I paying for again, right? Like, well, we think we're going to do this. We think it's going to be this square footage. We can't really tell you when we can get it done. I have no idea what it's going to look like at the end of the day. So procurement companies or groups end up still having like a very, very hard time authorizing the ability to do design build projects. And even more so kind of utilizing entirely different approaches.
And Marie,
yes.
Is that in the feasibility concept domain? Like when we're thinking about doing the project, is that when procurement would come in to play?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's when budgets are established. That's when essentially that's when basis of designs are developed. So those are typically a lot of the very first documents that are generated as part of projects, where you're generally saying, okay, we have a need, right? There's some eminent need we need for a new building, a new something, right? And you try to identify, well, what's the purpose behind it? So usually an architect would come on board and they would help you try to figure out and extract whatever information is from an owner to say, okay, well, I think this is what you're trying to say. And so as part of that kind of feasibility study, you then have to work with procurement in order to generate your request for proposal. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So what are some options and strategies for a path forward? So some of the articles that I've read recently actually recommend that there should be a new project delivery method. So besides design bid build, besides design build, IPD, they actually think that there should be another type of kind of contracting method that focuses on offsite construction and more specifically modularization. Okay, so that's something to kind of think about. So as part of that new it's developing new RFPs, okay, that say entirely different things. You're bringing people in on the very, very early end of all conceptual parts of projects. So there's two terms that can kind of be helped define for this process. One is design for manufacturing and assembly, which is DFMA. So that's essentially saying you're trying to design as much as you can to where you're just assembling parts and pieces, and it's really meant to minimize all of the waste on projects because you're really trying to use lean manufacturing processes and assembling the parts and pieces, not constructing them on site. Another term is design for deconstruction or design for disassembly. Both are often used interchangeably, or what's considered DFD. So construction as a whole is very, very wasteful. When we demo buildings, when we don't have an opportunity to reuse an existing building and we demo a building, almost all of that goes to waste. And us as a society, very few parts and pieces end up being recycled or reused or refurbished in other construction. And so there's a new phase to kind of go through from the design perspective to actually, how can we build buildings to where they can actually be disassembled? Okay, so imagine at the end of the life of the building, you're actually spending time, not just with the wrecking ball, but individually kind of taking windows out, right? And then you're disassembling all of the glass from the panes, from the exterior trim of the windows, and every part and piece. Actually, there's a method to deconstructing it to where you can maximize the amount of ability to recycle the components that are in there. The other thing, we just need more projects that are successful and more owners that are willing to step up and to take that challenge to say, I'm willing and I'm committed to doing this because I think my projects can be done quicker, better, and faster than other projects. Okay? So speed to market comes into play. But more people, as more and more of these projects are being shown as being successful projects, will definitely help in that process. We need to incorporate more lean construction practices, so part of the continuous improvement process. Continue using BIM in virtual design and construction through the design process to help figure out how we can better do trade coordination, as well as just the final pre-planning of construction. The design for manufacturing and assembly, design for deconstruction is really shifting that process to include offsite construction, maximizing our prefabrication as well, to where ultimately you're turning a site into an assembly site, not a fabrication site. Okay, so here's just a couple other pictures. I know we're almost short on time, so I'll flip through those, and I'm happy to share my slides with anybody who is interested.
Great. Is this a good time for me to open up for some questions?
And there's some resources if anybody's interested. Yes.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Marie regarding some things she talked about? Well, I have a question.
Okay, go for it.
Upfront costs and how prefab can offset that.
So
I mean,
to help prefabrication, so most companies, when they bid a project, they know what they're able to prefabricate and what they don't. So when they competitively bid that project, in most cases, they're incorporating their knowledge that they know they'll be able to fabricate a certain percentage of the work that they're doing. And so that's part of their win strategy to actually being awarded that project, because they think they can do it faster than anybody else. In terms of the modularization, again, that's where in the early design stages, as like a design build partner or a trade partner, and you have design input into how things are going. And so you're constantly updating your estimate based on any sort of change in design. So in most cases, that's more of what's considered a target value delivery system, to where the owner's like, here's a general thought of what I think my project should go for. And everybody on the project team is working together to try to make sure that the project meets that budget.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Marie?
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marie.
You're welcome.
I loved your presentation. I know you got to run off the class, so.
Yes. Sorry, I can't stay for your Sheree. So I'll see you guys later. Thank you very much, Candace, for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right, everybody. We have one more speaker today, and that's Sheree. How you doing?
I'm okay. How's everybody else?
Set and ready?
Yeah.
Great. All right. So your topic today is going to be about sustainability and how that also plays into our campus, correct?
That's right. And more specifically about carbon neutrality and what that means for construction. So a little bit about me, or do you want me to just jump in with that?
Oh, no, please.
Candace? Okay. Sorry. So I'm Sheree Chastain. I'm the Director of Energy and Sustainability at Chico State. I've only been on campus for about 2 years, so relatively new to being a state employee and maneuvering through state policies. Prior to that, I worked for 12 years as the head of sustainability at Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. I was involved in their construction project in North Carolina, the new brewery that was, well, I guess it's not new anymore, but they built a second brewery in North Carolina, and I was a part of that construction project that did achieve LEED Platinum. We were the first production brewery in North America to actually achieve platinum level. Just really excited, and it included not just our brewing facilities and operations, but the restaurant, the wastewater treatment plant, and everything else that went into that site. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that at the end, but that's not what I wanted to talk with you guys about today. I don't have any slides, but I do have some website links to some documents and some different sites that I'll be kind of popping in the chat for everybody. So what I wanted to talk about was Chico State. Chico State has made a commitment to be carbon neutral by 2030. So we have a short 9 years to get there. Our commitment is for scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll explain what each one of those is. And then I'm going to talk about what's not included, which I think is the most impactful for you all. So scope 1 emissions are everything that our campus owns, controls, and operates. Primarily, it's natural gas combustion for space heating and water heating, but space heating is the primary use there. Our vehicle fleet is also included. Refrigerants from cooling processes, as well as fertilizer and agricultural emissions are included there. Scope 2 emissions are emissions associated with electricity generation, transmission, and delivery. So all the energy that we're purchasing from our utility, we're accounting for the emissions associated with that. As specifically the state of California, but I think most utility grids work to integrate more renewable power into their portfolio mixes, that's going to continue drawing down the emissions levels that are associated with that energy. Now, the goals for California are impressive. California has passed legislation that our utility grid will be 100% renewable by 2045, which means a lot of construction on renewables within California, but that doesn't meet our 2030 target for Chico State. So we're going to have to really push the needle on that one quite a bit. Marie, actually, we've contracted with her to write our campus strategic energy master plan. So she's wrapping that up right now, and that master plan will dive much more specifically into natural gas emissions in scope 1 and scope 2. So hopefully we have that document here shortly. And then scope 3 emissions are things that are largely out of our campus control, but that contribute to our operations. The things that we quantify in scope 3 are students, faculty, and staff commuting to and from campus, which is our single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions. Well, not right now because nobody's commuting there, but in normal operations, that's our largest source of emissions. Sponsored travel for things like conferences or research, as well as our wastewater. So all of the wastewater that's leaving campus, all the emissions associated with that, and our landfill contributions are included in scope 3. Does anything stand out to anybody about those emissions that we're quantifying and measuring, specifically what might be absent? Just shout it out or put it in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. Anything stand out like, why don't they measure that? Okay, here's some hints. We don't measure any of our procurement emissions. So things like the paper that we're purchasing, the food that we're procuring, all the products that we're bringing in, we're not accounting for the emissions associated with that. We're not accounting for emissions associated with water conveyance. So we're purchasing all of this water from Cal Water. That water has to be pumped out of the ground, treated, and then conveyed to us. That requires a tremendous amount of energy that's not accounted for. Virtual servers, we're migrating our campus servers to be virtual. So we're moving those offsite to larger server farms. Basically, we're just transferring that energy. We're not accounting for the energy associated with that. The big one that's emerging right now, and there's actually been a lot of legislation around this in California, is around embodied carbon in construction and building materials. So what I'm going to put in the chat for you right now are a couple of things. Number one, oops, close the chat. Number one is a link to the campus climate action and resilience plan, which was just adopted. So you can cruise through that if you want more information about our emissions or the things that we haven't historically quantified and measured. But on this embodied carbon, that's accounting for energy included in building and construction. So the buildings, but also the finishings that are going into the buildings, like carpet or insulation. This is really new. It's emerging. You'll sometimes hear it called scope 3 as part of embodied carbon. A new term that's kind of popping up is scope 4 emissions, and that hasn't officially been adopted, and that's kind of still a wonky thing. But this idea is really we need to start addressing the materials that we are constructing with and accounting for the emissions associated with them. Now, the state of California, surprise, passed legislation. So there's currently a mandate in California to go with all of the other millions of mandates that we have, but there's a Buy Clean California Act. And the Buy Clean California Act, I'll put the link to that in the chat as well, that is requiring state agencies to we need to receive environmental product declarations, or EPDs, on all of the materials. Well, not all the materials, excuse me. It currently only applies to 4 building materials. The 4 building materials that are included, what we're asking for in these environmental product declarations is what is the global warming potential of that product? And then sourcing from suppliers that have the least global warming potential product. So the products included are structural steel, concrete reinforcing steel, flat glass, and mineral wool board insulation. Pretty much all buildings have all of those, right? So these are things that are now required by the state of California for state agencies like Chico State. Now, while this is a mandate on state agencies like Chico State or other state buildings or municipalities, the burden is going to fall to developers and contractors, because we're now going to be required to request this for at least these 4 materials from all of our developers and contractors. So having a basic understanding of an environmental product declaration, how to get it from the products that you're sourcing, how to get it from the products that you're choosing or that you're recommending for construction projects, I think is going to be incredibly important moving forward. I only see this list expanding. So right now, like I said, it only applies to 4 materials. I could see very easily things like concrete being added to the list, carpet and other finishings being added to the list, right? This list is only going to continue to expand. So really it's forcing at least the state level, it's forcing us to take a look at the climate change impacts of the products that we're using, where we're sourcing them from. And then ultimately that's going to dictate who we're buying products from, right? And which companies will be the most successful in states like California. Now, like I said, that only applies to those 4 products right now. And that will just continue to expand. We're going to see more products added to the list. Industry knows this. The large industries that are supplying products they're recognizing this as a serious impact. So what they've done is they've come together to begin building this embodied carbon in construction calculator, or the EC3. Has anybody heard of that? No? Okay, it's still pretty new. I'll put a link to that here. So the EC3 tool, like I said, is the embodied carbon in construction calculator. It's still being expanded upon, and products are still being added and information is still being updated. Like I said, this is a really, really, really new and emerging field. So there's not a ton of research or data out there, but we're getting it. And like I said, companies are recognizing that this is of critical importance. So what you can do is you can register for free. You don't have to pay for anything or be affiliated with any organization. You can just register for it, which I've registered for it, and I clicked around a little bit, but I haven't had a ton of time to really dive into the calculator. But basically what the calculator allows you to do is sort by material types, which does include the 4 materials that are covered in the Buy Clean California Act, but it includes a lot of other things too. Like I said, finishing, I think there's different insulation products in there. So there's different lists of things, and they'll just continue to add to this. This is largely industry self-reported, but I think a lot of it has been either peer reviewed or reviewed by institutions, like Chico State. I don't think we're a contributor reviewer, but there are professionals and a whole bunch of different folks that are reviewing this information to make sure that it's true and accurate. So what you can do is kind of click through the different product types, and you can find these environmental product declarations. You can look by manufacturer and say carpet, right? And it'll list like a few different carpet manufacturers, and then you can choose the carpet manufacturer that has the lowest global warming potential for their product, or see how different products stack up against one another. So this tool will continue to evolve. It'll continue to grow. It'll continue to include more products as it moves forward. For Chico State, like I said, we have not measured these emissions. So these emissions are not included as part of our 2030 carbon neutrality goal. That could very easily change. Part of what I'm calling for in the Climate Action Resilience Plan is a larger conversation on campus around our full holistic emissions, what we're measuring, why we're measuring it. Should we be including things like the products we're procuring or the buildings that we're building, or the embodied carbon that exists in our building stock on campus? Should we be including the energy at our virtual server farms, right? So, like I said, as this relates to you guys, I think in the construction world, especially in California, but I think a lot of states are going to start following suit, having this basic understanding of emissions, where they come from, how they're generated, how to reduce them, but also understanding product and environmental product declarations, how to interpret them, how to read them, how to actually get them from your vendors and suppliers, because you will be the conduit between folks like me, Chico State employees that are required to have this, and our large construction projects. Right, so this is now going to apply to Butte Hall, which will be the next new building built on campus. This is going to fall on the developer. They're going to have to provide this information. I think this will start to eclipse LEED. I know a lot of folks kind of put a lot of stock in LEED, and as I mentioned in my comments when we first got going, I was part of a LEED project, a LEED Platinum project, and I think LEED has done incredible things to change the conversation within specifically the built environment about sustainability and the impacts that the built environment has. But I think we're kind of moving beyond that now. And my personal opinions about LEED based on my own previous experiences, but we can save that for another time. So that was really the bulk of what I wanted to share with you guys, is just to kind of create an initial awareness of greenhouse gas emissions and some of the conversations that are happening that directly impact the construction industry and where I see that going, but also provide you, with the links that I've put in the chat, a few resources to help you start to understand this a little bit more. And like I said, play around with that calculator tool a little bit, click through different product types, see what you can see. Like I said, I have not spent a ton of time with that calculator, and it is new. I think it was just launched like 7 or 8 months ago. So it's still a very new and developing tool for everybody. So with that, I'm going to stop talking a bit early and just kind of open it up for questions and conversations around this topic.
Right. Thank you very much, Sherry. If you guys have any questions, I actually had a question about this new declaration and when it goes in and where I can look at that information up, finding out about it.
The Buy Clean California.
Mm-hmm.
That's the second link that I popped in there.
Okay.
Takes effect this July.
And if anybody else has any questions that they want to ask about the campus, about things that Sherry talked about, please feel free to ask away. This is your chance.
I had a quick question, and it was regards to the 2030, the Chico clean or being carbon neutral. Is that a initiative that was brought up through like the CSU Chancellor's Office, or was that like a Chico State taking initiative on their own and wanting to, you know, turn greener?
That was a Chico State thing. And that goal was actually adopted in 2007. So it's a very long-standing goal for our campus. If you look in the report, the Climate Action and Resilience Plan, which was the first link that I put in, you'll see that our Scope 1 emissions have pretty much been flat since our 1990 baseline, which is very discouraging. That's basically what that says, is that we've invested almost nothing in reducing the actual emissions that we're physically responsible for on our campus. We've had a lot of leadership changes on our campus over the last several years, and I'm personally excited about moving forward on this. My boss is Mike Guzzi. I don't know if any of you have had Mike Guzzi's class, if any of you are civil engineering. He teaches a course there. So he's my boss, and he's a huge champion in this work. You know, and so he's going to really push us, I think, pretty hard to make sure that we meet these goals. Because, like I said, we've had this since 2007. We now have 9 years left to get there, and we're all kind of feeling a little antsy in the pantsy, like,
Yeah.
this is getting a bit close.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, okay, awesome. So, has the CSU system developed, have they adopted anything similar to this? Because I don't know if I recall seeing something, but I mean, maybe I just got to do my own research, but I was just curious to know if you knew something about that.
Yeah, the CSU system has a sustainability policy, which I can put that in the chat for you too. So there is a CSU sustainability policy. It's not, this is okay. This is the fun part about working for the state, right? I'm learning all of these bureaucratic things. The chancellor's office is really reluctant to set these types of goals at a system-wide level. There are a few exceptions to that. For example, single-use plastics, that is a system-wide ban. Every CSU in the system needs to phase out by next year, which Chico's already done, plastic straws, plastic bags, and single-use water bottles. Aside from that, there are very few, very specific, you will meet this, that have been implemented by the CSU system, by the chancellor's office. Most of the goals that campuses have made are at the campus level. Each campus, so there's 23 in the system, 23 campuses in the system, and I think at least half, if not more, have a carbon neutrality goal of some capacity. None of them are as aggressive as Chico. I think, I don't know what's up with Chico, but they were like, we're coming in hot. Like, we're just going to set this like super impossible goal. Most campuses have committed to being carbon neutral for scope 1 and 2 by 2030 to 2035, somewhere in there. And then they've added scope 3 in by like 2040 or 2050, right? A bit more reasonable. No, Chico was like, we're all in. And so ours, I think, is the most aggressive goal in the system. There are other campuses that have similarly aggressive, not quite as aggressive goals as we do. But the climate on the carbon side has not been driven specifically by the chancellor's office. Oh, I forgot to put the link to the policy in there. I'll try to pull that up for you guys. There are a few other things, but again, a lot of it is state mandated, right? So like the state mandates X% diversion from landfill. So the state has said that all state agencies will achieve 75% diversion from landfill by, I think it's 2025. We're a state agency, so we have to follow these state mandates. That was pretty long-winded.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question for Sherry today? No? All All right. Well, with that, thank you so much.
Actually, I have one more question, if that's
Oh,
okay.
Diana,
Sorry,
go-
everyone. I'm
go
that
ahead.
person.
fine.
I was just curious to see like how we're, right. You just mentioned Butte Hall. It's getting built. I believe does construction start 2022? So
So,
something like that. So how are right? So all of these policies have to get implemented in there. Is there any like specifics? Because I know it's like a more, it's a, what is it? It's not a design build, but it's like a partner. It's like IPD. Not really sure, or something like that. I don't know. I heard through the chain. Sorry, everyone. And so I was just curious. Is there going to be any like special design requirements, or are you guys going to force the general contractor that did get that job? Are you guys going to encourage them to do or guide them to do any special sustainability related practices, or
yes. And I think both Guzzy and I are pretty excited about the opportunities with Butte. The science building project happened before either one of us were on campus. And so there were, I think, some missed opportunities there. I mean, the science building is built incredibly energy efficient, but given the nature of some of the processes that exist in there, it is a science building. So there are a lot of really energy intense processes. The air handling system, for example, it's 100% fresh air system because of chemical use in labs. That's incredibly wasteful, right? But that's what needed to happen in that building. There's also going to be a natural gas boiler in the building. Doesn't help us meet or wane the steam goals of getting off of natural gas. With the Butte building, we were able to, within the RFP process and within the contract and awarding process, to specify that we wanted a net zero energy building. That's another, I think, important point of clarification. You're going to hear net zero a lot, right? Net zero. What net zero? Net zero carbon, net zero energy, net zero water, net zero emissions. Like what is the zero that you're trying to get to? So for this building, we're specifying net zero energy, which means that we're going to have renewable energy on the building. Now, I don't know what the design is going to look like quite yet, but if you look at the existing Butte Hall, right, it's 7 stories, very tall and narrow. So the roof footprint is not large enough to carry a renewable energy system to supply the entire building. So what the project is going to have to do, most likely, is supplement with an additional renewable energy installation somewhere else on campus. Parking lots don't make a lot of sense for us just because they're all covered in beautiful trees, which is magnificent. So we're going to have to find another location to put some additional renewable energy. So we have specified that it will be a net zero energy building, which is pretty exciting. Hopefully they'll get there. We'll see in a few years. But yeah, I think construction should start, at least right now, the plan is for that to start in 2022, with demolition of the existing science building starting, I think, this summer. And that, I think, is supposed to take about a year for the demo, and then the new construction will start right after that. It'll also be net zero rainwater or net zero runoff, I think is the term, which the science building is as well, which I think is really, really cool. So any rainwater that falls on that building is channeled into bioswales, which allows it to percolate back down into the groundwater supply. So the water that falls there doesn't just end up in a storm drain and away it goes, it actually stays on the site. And I think it's going to be incredibly important for climate resilience in California to have more of that type of construction. Not just putting in rainwater barrels that are expensive. A lot of times they're ugly. Our climate, we get a ton of rain, very short windows, and then none when we actually need it. So using the aquifer as that storage vessel makes a ton more sense in our climate. And I think the Butte project is supposed to have that same approach to net zero water runoff.
That's really cool and really exciting. So thank you.
Yeah.
I have one for you too. I feel like the field of like sustainability in general is ever growing and it's growing at an exponential rate. But as a Chico State student, specifically Chico State construction management student, is there anything you wish that we knew more about prior to going into the industry about sustainability or just I don't know fundamentals when it comes to construction? Anything you'd like to see us I don't know have a better background about?
That
Like
is,
sustainable building? Yeah.
yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And I think really my hope, and we're working on this, we have I guess it's now a 7-year plan together, is that every student has graduated from Chico State with some fundamental knowledge of climate change and climate resilience and how their degree path fits into that. So within construction management, I think it's going to be really important to recognize that you are constructing buildings that have very long life cycles, right? You're not constructing things that are going to be, well, hopefully you're not, that are just going to be taken down in a couple of years, right? You need to have a fundamental understanding of the impacts that what you are designing and constructing have, the products that you're using, how you are building, how you are designing, how you are constructing what you're building. Recognizing too that the climate is going to continue to change. So what you're building for now, the flood modeling that you might be doing, or the heat days or the cooling days that you might be constructing for, that's going to continue to change. We are experiencing that here in Chico, I think more than anybody. That flood, I don't know if you guys were around that spring 2019 where we had that downpour that parked over Chico, right? Caused massive amounts of flooding to our campus, millions of dollars in damage to our campus. And that's because it was not designed for that amount of rainfall that quickly, right? We're going to continue to see these types of weather swings. Fires, that's a real thing, that's a reality. So designing air handling and air filtration systems that can handle that type of air pollution that we'll continue to see as a result of climate change. So there's another tool that you can use called CalAdapt. And what you can do with CalAdapt, it's really cool. You can plug in by zip code and it will tell you what you can expect in that zip code over the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years. So as you're designing something or constructing something, you can say, what type of temperatures should we be building this for? Extreme heat, extreme cold, orientation, what type of flood or drought might this area experience in the future? So that's my hope, is that you have a fundamental understanding of a changing climate, but also recognizing that your contributions are very long lasting because of the nature of construction projects.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you.
Yeah, good question. All good questions.
And one thing I'd like to say along that is I did my pathways with sustainability, and I'm really glad that I did. And so for those who've had to choose, I know it kind of seems like you just grab whatever, but I think that the sustainability path was a great kind of partner to go with our program. And so that's my little 2 cents on that.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much, Sherry. I really appreciate all your knowledge and input.
Put my email in the chat as well. Feel free to reach out if you ever have another question at some point.
And you're also heading a sustainability conference in March. If you want to say a little something about that before you head out.
Yes, the This Way to Sustainability Conference. If you haven't attended that yet, I'm just full of links for you guys. Sorry about that. It's free for students to attend. So please register. We have a whole track on the built environment. So there are 7 breakout sessions dedicated to the built environment. Marie and I are actually presenting together at the conference, doing a session about climate action planning and her strategic energy master plan that she's been writing. So check out the conference, register for it. Like I said, it's free, really good experience. We have a ton of information available. Candace will be moderating a few sessions at the conference. If any of you are interested in moderating, really good resume building experience. So shoot me a note if you're interested in moderating. We need some moderators for some breakout sessions. And I hope you guys are able to make it.
All right. Well, thank you so much again. And anybody who came today, you'll be getting a lunch on us. Expect that later. If you don't get it, send me an email, yell at me. Tomorrow we have Wendy's LinkedIn meeting at 7 p.m. And you want to say a little something about that, Wendy?
We will have a representative from PCI coming, and she's going to be going over how to use LinkedIn and why it's really important to have a LinkedIn during today's day. So yeah, that'll be tomorrow at 7 p.m. for everybody to come join us there.
Awesome. Thanks again for supporting our club. And Diana, did you have anything you wanted to say before we finish up?
Really just, honestly, thank you, Sherry, for sharing us all that really great information. It was really interesting, and I'm really happy that Chico State's taking this initiative. And I really want to thank all of you guys that are here and attending today. This is your first step into this journey of sustainability. So thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for attending our WIC Week event. You guys are more than welcome to attend all the other events we have this week. We have one tomorrow and one on Thursday, another lunch and learn opportunity to get lunch on us. But really, thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here with us, and hopefully you guys learned some really good information. So thank you. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to contact any of us. I think most of you guys might have my contact information, or if not, I have your guys'. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Everyone, thank you. Wow. That was really good.
Yeah, that went really good.